Facebook gave us a little bit of a delay today. That's okay. Let me go check it to see how we sound. Hold on, everybody. Then I'll bring Eric Buchanan up and we'll talk about our topics for the day. All right. Let me see what we sound like over here. There's a delay on Facebook today. I don't know what it is. Facebook give us a little bit of a delay today. That's okay. Yep, we sound pretty good over there. With all that being said, this is Of, By, and For the People, conversation centered around the American experiment and headlines. Eric and I will bring some topics to the table. We give opinions and push back. Sometimes our friend Matthew Durham joins us. We try to get guests from time to time. We have book reviews. We have special editions on topics. There's some offshoots of this podcast. You can find the constitutional deep dives where Eric is walking us line by line through the Constitution. You can find those here, headlinesandopinions.com, or from Eric Buchanan and Associates website, buchanandisability.com. We also have a historical one right now. Eric is also walking us through these big moments in time as the United States was getting founded 250 years ago. It's Celebrate America 250. Again, find those here, or the Celebrate America 250 podcast. With all that being said, today we are going to be talking about some changes at the EPA around CO2, all of these other things. My friend Jeff Stiles and I just had a little bit of a back and forth on this. You can find all those at thejeffstiles.com. We're going to talk about the SAVE Act, the economy, and I am sure I will go off the rails at some point, and Eric Buchanan will have to ride herd over my stupid ADHD brain and my thoughts. Here we go. Eric Buchanan's coming up in 3, 2, 1. Eric Buchanan, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, Clint, how are you? Good to see you.
Good seeing you, man. Real quick, it's a happy President's Day.
Happy George Washington's birthday.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you have a favorite president?
I do. It's George Washington. I've thought about that over the years, and he's so great above everybody else that people kind of bypass him. The question is always, who's your second favorite president? I do like to remind people, though, that President's Day really is it started out as George Washington's birthday, and I hate the fact that we've just kind of forgotten about that.
Well, who's your second favorite? Let's go ahead and ask you the question.
Thomas Jefferson.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I like George Washington. That was always, and I hate to say this, and I know that it sounds very cliche. I'm a Reagan guy. I like Reagan. I think the first 2 or 3 years he was in office was at a very pivotal point in United States history. Do I think it ended up being as strong as how it started? No, but he came in and made some decisions, and I think kind of pulled the country from about an 8-year malaise. And so I'm a Reagan guy. He'd be in my top 3.
Yeah, I like Ronald Reagan. I don't know about top 3, but I'm
a serving moment in time when he was needed in the history of the. I mean, I think I know you remember it well better than I do because you're a history guy. But the United States had not been doing really good from about 74, 75 on.
I remember that very, very well, and that's a great argument for Reagan. But my great grandmother would kill me for this, but Abraham Lincoln came along at the right time. I'm sure you remember.
And what is the deal with your internet, dude? The last couple of weeks, we're going to get your internet checked. I do this all the time. No one else pops out. Eric Buchanan is about to say something controversial, something that the internet gods do not want us to hear, and he falls out. I don't know what it is, but when you come back, your grandmother was going to hate you, Eric, and I don't know what it was for, but you're coming up in 3, 2, 1. What the hell was she mad at you about?
My great-grandmother,
who
was from Maryland, but she was a Southern Democrat with a capital S, that if I said that Abraham Lincoln was my third favorite president, she would be very, very upset. She was very much the Southern woman with she had her salt and pepper shakers on the kitchen table were Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Robert E. Lee was the pepper because he had the darker beard and that kind of stuff. She had the trivet, the thing you put a hot plate on in the middle of the dining room, the kitchen table, was the seal of the Confederacy.
Interesting times.
She was born in 1901. This was in the late 60s, early 70s that I have those memories of going to visit her. But
tell everybody who you are, what you do, and then we're going to jump into these topics today and give our back and forth on, sir.
So, hi, everybody. First, a commercial. Eric Buchanan Associates, the sponsor of this podcast, helps people all over the United States who've been denied long-term disability or individual disability insurance benefits. If you or anyone you know has a problem with an insurance company not paying benefits because of a policy that's supposed to pay disability benefits, please reach out to us from anywhere in the United States. We are not licensed in every state, You can look on the World Wide Web on our website at buchanandisability.com to see where we are licensed. But we have worked with clients from 48 different states so far. We hope to get it all the way up to 50 at some point. We work with local attorneys or otherwise follow the local rules in the states where we're not licensed. But because we have such a niche, narrow practice, people have a hard time finding attorneys who handle disability insurance or ERISA benefits. We can help with any benefits you get through work. They usually fall under federal law called ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. We can also do these kind of cases, help with these kind of benefits if you got the policy on your own. And that includes not just long-term disability or individual disability insurance benefits, but long-term care benefits, life insurance benefits, and large health insurance claims. So any questions about any of that, please reach out again at buchanandisability.com. Very quickly about me, I was a history major at the Virginia Military Institute, went in the Navy for 5 years, served at the very end of the Cold War flying P-3s, chasing enemy submarines. Sometimes they were Soviet submarines, later they were Russian submarines. When I got out, I went to law school at WNL where I paid a special attention to constitutional law. I love the Constitution. I love U.S. history. I was also a Boy Scout. I also played rugby along the way with some very fine people that I got to be friends with, both in law school and then also here in Chattanooga. I love talking politics and getting these opinions out there. I wish we could have more conversations across the divide, though, Clint. I have a very hard time finding people who politically disagree with us but are willing to engage in actual fact-based, rational conversations.
It is, to me, it's a little crazy. I get text messages from people who are pretty much on the other side of a lot of important issues, at least 4 or 5 times a month. And then I get people like, you should get this guy on or this girl on. And I've tried to get them, and either I get, oh, we'll look at it later. I'm not sure. What should I expect? And I've told them, I mean, they listen to us. We're pretty civil. I mean, I don't, we have had guests on in the past, and they've been treated, I would say, sometimes with very kid gloves because we do value them. We know how hard it is to get them back. As a matter of fact, I can't think of a repeat guest, even though we have been very genteel. I mean, I tend to overqualify and be very nice to them. You and Matthew are coming, from their perspective more than I do, but it's hard to get them on. I've said this about my friend Jeff, and he'll say it. I don't think he'd mind me saying this, calling him out on it, but I don't want to talk policy. And I'm like, well, when you don't talk policy and the nuance of a headline, that's how you get today. And I got into it, and we'll get into our topics, but this is a good example of what you were saying, Eric. We got into, it came out that 2 of the ICE agents, when they were saying that they were pursuing the Venezuelan illegal immigrant, so they were ambushed by other Venezuelan immigrants or migrants. Now they're coming out that those 2 ICE agents may have lied under oath, and they may not have been the truth. And my take was, to me, that's a sign that you can trust this administration more than, I'm not saying you should trust any administration completely, but you can trust them more than maybe you're giving them credit for, because the one that's not a video, they're holding themselves accountable. And he throws that in there with the other 2 tragedies where the gentleman was shot interfering and the lady was shot that, I say trying to, that accidentally, whether it's accidentally or intentionally, hit a ICE officer with a car. And he equates all of that. He goes, when they're coming out and saying this about this video and this about this video, and now they're saying they may have lied about this thing over here. And I'm like, the difference is, Jeff, you're taking 2 things that we both can see, and you're just assuming that what I look at, it's wrong, and the way you look at it's right. That's a difference of opinion. We can debate what they're saying about it because we can actually see it. And the one thing that is in the air quote, the dark of night, the one thing that they could really plausibly deny forever because there's no video to contradict it, they're actually coming out and doing the thing that you want them to do. That's proof of trust. And he doesn't see it that way. He sees it as a lack of truth no matter what, because it's the confirmation bias type thing. But we can't get people on to talk about those things.
I like Jeff. He's a great storyteller. He's a good guy. He can be a good friend. He's a shitbag when it comes to having political discussions because he won't engage with people from the other side. He wants to have his own ranting and raving.
He engages with me. He just won't go that. We don't have a full podcast where we can actually talk about the details of one thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, let's spend an hour talking about this thing, and he doesn't want to do that.
Jeff, let's get on here and talk sometime.
Yeah.
Just I promise we'll keep it civil. I like you, Jeff. Keep it civil, please.
All right, let's do this. Let's jump into this first topic. You had sent this as a thing, and it didn't surprise me. It just, we don't address a lot of climate stuff on here as far as details, but this is a big deal, and it's again it riles up the other side. So you want to set it up for us?
Yeah, I don't think it just riles up the other side. I think this is a momentous change, and it's consistent with this idea that we're in a cycle at the end of 80 years after World War II. We're at a new time period, but also every 50 years we change the way the socioeconomic cycles in America. And if you aren't familiar with those two cycles, Clint and I've been talking about those for about 5 years now. They come from a book called Storm Before the Calm by George Friedman. But we've also kind of just seen just things change over time, generational, that kind of stuff. And I think this is part of this dramatic change in the way the administrative state and agencies are going to be treated. So the ruling is that the EPA has taken 6 greenhouse gases off of the list of pollutants. That's the most simple way of saying this. That the endangerment finding made under the Obama administration that had 6 gases listed as greenhouse gases and therefore could be regulated, that's been overturned by the current EPA based on new scientific studies and also take into account basically the cost benefit analysis. Part of the issue here, Clint, is that these 6 gases, 3 of them are entirely natural. They just occur in nature: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. That's our atmosphere. They're just in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is what you and I exhale. We bring in oxygen, our body uses the oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. And whether you believe in God or just the miracle of life happening somehow, the way our system works is we exhale the carbon dioxide. You know who takes it in? Plants with green leaves, right?
Yeah.
And then they turn around and what do they produce? They produce oxygen. That's the cycle of life. So carbon dioxide is just a natural part of what's in the atmosphere. And the history of this is there came about this theory that somehow an imbalance of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and an imbalance of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, which is also a large part of the atmosphere, somehow was going to cause the temperature to rise. And then it was going to somehow cause the temperatures to vary more. And so the Obama administration put these on the list of pollutants under the Clean Air Act. And the big controversy at the time was whether an agency had enough deference to go beyond pollutants being those things being manufactured by man that were like lead being put out by a tailpipe of an old car using lead gas, or whether carbon monoxide being polluted by cars counts as pollutants. So those things the Clean Air Act clearly covers. What the controversy was is the Clean Air Act doesn't say anything about naturally occurring just nature. It's like literally declaring the air to be a pollutant. Well, the Supreme Court, the EPA under Obama declared natural elements, natural compounds to be not elements, but compounds to be greenhouse gases. And the Supreme Court, in a very close divided decision, Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007, said that the EPA had authority, had the amount of discretion to declare those things to be pollutants, even though the Clean Air Act didn't anticipate natural things being pollutants. And so that's sort of the history of this. But that doesn't stop the EPA from going back and reconsidering. That court case just says they could be. Well, now the EPA has gone back and said, look, we've looked at all this. The science is kind of crazy on this. Carbon dioxide is just naturally occurring. And so they took them off the list. Now there's going to be a big controversy. Everybody's complaining. I can go into more detail about how they went through the proper scientific channels to do this. There's an argument that they should not have taken in the cost benefit of analysis into account. I think they probably could have under the president's guidance. Some people would say under the Administrative Procedures Act, it's just technically they're under the Clean Air Act, it's just whether it's a pollutant or not. I still have a problem with the Supreme Court case from 2007. It is the law, but to say naturally occurring things can be pollutants. But Clint, let me just conclude by handing it back over to you, because one of the things that people have gotten confused about this is Bill Maher, who sometimes says some smart stuff. He's a liberal, but he recognizes when he says wrong. Clint, I'm just going to play just a quick clip here. You ready?
Yep.
Doug Burnham, he's the Interior Secretary. Listen to this, the way they all line up behind this nonsense. He said, CO2, carbon, was never a pollutant. He said, when we breathe, we emit CO2. Okay, Doug, you know what? Let's try this little experiment. Tonight, when you get home, go in the garage, close the door, turn the car on, and let's see if carbon is a pollutant, okay?
What's wrong with that?
What's conflating two different things? Oh, damn it. I don't know what the issue is, Eric Buchanan. What is wrong with that? He was asking. It's two different things they are conflating there. He's acting like the same thing is the same thing, and they're not. That is really apples and oranges. Eric, you got to come back on with me, buddy, because you were about to make a good point. Don't even set it up again. I'm going to bring you in. You just start talking. You asked what is wrong with that. It's not all the same carbon, my friend.
I think our friends on the left and some normal middle of the road people have been confused about this forever. When they heard that carbon was being regulated, they assumed it was carbon monoxide, which is a poison. It's how people commit suicide. And you've seen the mystery movies where the guy parks his car in the garage and somehow he committed suicide, and there's a garden hose from the hose pipe coming in the window of the car, and or even if you're sitting there without the hose pipe and just run the car all night, you're going to get poisoned because carbon monoxide will replace oxygen in the blood and you eventually suffocate. It is not the same thing as carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is what trees breathe and what we exhale, and it's a naturally occurring gas that's it's a significant part of the atmosphere. If Bill Mayer gets it that confused that he thinks you're going to get poisoned by carbon monoxide when the law and the change is about carbon dioxide, I can understand why people are railing against this because they think they're making it lawful to create more carbon monoxide, but it's not. And if you listen carefully to what Bill Mayer says, he never says carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. He says carbon. Well, carbon is an element that's in carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. It's in lots of stuff. It's in most life forms. It is basically one of the key elements that that make up everybody. And they talk about carbon taxes and net carbon zero is one of the things, and whether something's carbon neutral. Well, are we talking about CO2, carbon dioxide, the common ordinary gas that we all exhale? Are we talking about carbon monoxide, the poisonous gas that's still on the list of things that are pollutants? Well, if people like Bill Maher are still this confused this long after this rule's gone into effect, no wonder people don't understand how crazy the original rule was that basically said normal atmospheric gas can be pollutants. Go ahead, Clint.
I was just going to say, I'll add a few things. You know, if you read what the climate cult says, and I'm going to bring that term up again because it was used by Rubio, but it says yes, carbon dioxide is a major greenhouse gas and is a primary driver of global climate change. It traps infrared radiation in the Earth's atmosphere, warming the planet. Human activities, especially carbon burning fossil fuels, have significantly increased in concentration, accounting for nearly 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. So it is saying carbon dioxide is one of the main things that is contributing to the planet warming, according to them. So they're in their world, they're tracking the right thing, not just monoxide, but carbon dioxide is one of the worst things. CO2 is responsible for 80% of the total heating influence from human produced greenhouse gases since 1990. So but to your point, what Mara was saying is completely different. That's not what gets you when you go to the garage. And the confusion around this, when they say the word carbon without having these detailed conversations, is crazy. And the Jeff got into it today when he was bringing up the climate cult, which Rubio talked about, and you said something there about science, and Jeff looks at this administration as anti-science, and I look back at it as the climate cult. Again, you almost have to pick a side and say both sides are either all right or all wrong. Have human beings contributed to the climate change? Absolutely. We're part of the ecosystem. We're going to affect it. Absolutely. And we're one of the main drivers of change in some way or form or another because we're the most impactful of all the things, living organisms on the planet. Has it changed naturally over the last 300, 400, 500 million years, 20,000 years? Yes. There's been volcanoes that have seashells on top of mountains and cities lost under the ocean. The world sometimes, I have a strange feeling, just turns everything upside down and shakes it up. We don't know when it's going to happen. And then society starts redeveloping and we go through these cycles again. That's what I personally believe. That's just me.
There are natural cycles of the world. There's been ice ages in the
Whole
past.
flip.
There's
Yeah.
been warming periods. Those things are going to happen naturally. Does mankind contribute to that in a measurable, meaningful way? I am not
Well,
convinced.
so that's where I was going to get to it. Even if you took the United States down to zero, if it every metric that the people on the left wanted to hit, it would affect the change on a global scale on a very, 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 very small level because other developing countries don't have the ability to change their technologies. China, who does have the ability, says y'all can screw off. They don't have to. They're not going to crush their economy to accommodate something that they don't see any benefit of. And
So,
I'm not telling again, this comes across as denying it. I'm not denying anything. I am 100% agreeing. The human beings can affect the climate. I want us to be respectful and we're supposed to take care of our planet, but those shouldn't mean we crush society because of it.
right, and that's an important argument to have about climate change and whether or not we want to have pollution or not.
Right.
But there's another layer to this I think is very important to get across. Whether or not we want to stop putting out lead into the atmosphere or carbon monoxide into the atmosphere or other real pollutants, things that are actually dangerous, is an important argument. Whether or not CO2 is even part of that conversation, whether we can produce, like, if we produce as much as possible, what would we get? Greener trees and more forests? There's the evidence that the CO2 is the problem is an incredibly uh, almost impossible to measure. Clint, what percentage of the atmosphere is CO2?
11%.
0.04, less than 1/2 of 1% of all the atmosphere. It varies between 0.04 and 0.42. That's 420 to 428 parts per million. It's a tiny, less than 1/2 1% of the atmosphere. The other big one that people are mad about is nitrous oxide. What percentage of the atmosphere is nitrous oxide? You want
I
to
was
take
so
a guess?
wrong on that one. Let me go with 1.3.
How about 0.00003? It is 330 parts per billion. It is less than 1 part per million. It's a third of a part per million. And they're both naturally
Well,
occurring. They both are just naturally in the atmosphere. Plants create these gases. What man does is a tiny percentage of a tiny percentage of a tiny percentage. The idea that the carbon dioxide and methane and carbon and nitrous oxide are contributing to any kind of global change compared to what the atmosphere just naturally does. That's just it's you just can't measure something that small in any meaningful way. But what happens when you declare these things to be pollutants? It
well,
gives the government tremendous power because
absolutely.
everything has carbon dioxide in it. Now all of a sudden they can regulate not just cars and planes and trains, but one of the things that happened because of that was the Obama administration then turned around with they have this new weapon to fight so-called climate change that's caused by naturally occurring greenhouse gases, to basically say that we can regulate all the power plants in the United States, not individually by the amount of pollution that they put out, but by their collective pollution to the point where we can outlaw oil burning power plants. We can't have generators that burn gasoline anymore that produce public power, for example, or that produce use fuel oil for that. And then we'll get rid of the ones that burn natural gas. Well, natural gas is pretty close to zero pollutants. It's a little bit, but it's compared to the amount of efficiency that it does to create power. And so what ended up happening was that case went all the way to Supreme Court, and that was West Virginia versus EPA, that actually said that was the EPA going too far, creating a regulation that combined all of the pollutants from these power plants into one national measure. And in fact, the Obama administration tried to make it part of the worldwide measure. So if China, going back to your point a minute ago, was putting out too much in terms of pollutants, whether they're greenhouse gases or real pollutants, then the United States would even be more restricted in order to comply with the worldwide standards. We were putting not just a giant handcuff on ourselves, we were putting ourselves in an Iron Maiden. We weren't going to make any power. We were deindustrialized.
Ah, damn it, Eric. I do not know what's going on. I will fill mine in. Hopefully, he can still hear us, but I will fill mine in. I will admit, you are cutting out at appropriate times. Whoever is cutting you off is picking. The gods are picking really good times there, because right now it's cutting you off when you're finishing a thought, which I think is very polite of them. But I am going to jump in right here, because I also don't like getting preached to 321. I don't like getting preached to about climate change from billionaires who don't care about their carbon, air quote, carbon footprint. They're taking jets all over the place to tell me how bad the world's going to be. And Al Gore has to change his story every 10 years and tell us how bad, how he was right and yet he's still wrong. A couple things I'm going to bring up. One, your friend Jeff Stiles brought up this morning that as an example of how impactful we are in the last 55 years, Delaware has increased its temperature by 5.8 degrees, which means there's no ice on the very Delaware River that George Washington famously crossed. So they came out and said, you could not make that portrait today if George Washington were trying to cross at that time of year. Just throwing out one example of how the left likes to argue about that. At least my friend Jeff likes to argue about that. Also, Jeff will also
Can I address that just very
quickly?
Go
for it. I don't, yeah.
Anecdotal stories from one particular place is never okay when we argue why those things are bad when the left does something. But when they want to do it, they bring up this one little anecdote. Delaware has changed. First of all, I'm not buying that, since the overall climate change has been almost nothing compared to what they originally predicted. It's like less than 1%. So, and he's saying, since when has it changed? You measuring from
55 years, I think he said.
One particular very cold year, and then now it's been warmer since then. Well, go back and do a longer time period. You can always show a significant improvement or things getting worse if you pick the time period. I'm going to pick the warmest summer in the 1800s and show that it's actually colder now.
There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, and that's what this is.
And then there's liberals with climate change.
Well, and to your point, one of the things he and I've also talked about is every time I bring this up and I give any pushback, again, I'm relegated to being I'm against climate change or you're a denier. Just because you talk about something doesn't mean I'm not an election denier. I'm not a climate denier. I'm a conversationalist, which means there are plenty of things you might be right about, Jeff, and there's plenty of things you're wrong about. I'm just willing to talk about it till we find out which is which for me and for you. But he also says, hey, man, 98% of scientists agree. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. So when science, air quotes, science changes around vaccines, food, or elections, when the facts change, you see it as, because he admitted it today. He does it every time. He brings his take on everything through Trump derangement syndrome filter. He says it up front. But when that changes, it's the institutions that are taking a knee to Trump. Okay, I submit that the 98% of the scientists, not all of them, but a majority of them, have been taking a knee to whoever was paying for the studies, wherever the political clout was coming from. Who are the car industries and the people involved in the EV industries? Are they the ones funding the study that gives you, we need this to prove so we then can go get the subsidies? It's been, by the way, it was that way with cigarettes and sugar in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was that way about oil. Every major industry has tried their best to put the science out. That's why you had doctors smoking cigarettes, for the love of God. I mean, it's not new. And so to just come out and say all scientists agree, I'm like, does that mean we dismiss the scientists who disagree? Because Robert Malone was just on Joe Rogan again, and that guy looks pretty damn smart after COVID when they tried to completely undo his career.
Yeah, all scientists agree argument went. I didn't agree with that years and years ago, because you have to, like you said, pay attention to who's funding the studies, who's buttering their bread, and there's always been a flaw over the certain percentage of climate scientists agree. You can go on and do some research on the internet and find the articles that actually break that down and find out how that's a totally bogus statistic. But on top of that, we just learned that 90-something% of the scientists were agreeing that sex change operations for kids when they're minors is a great idea. That lasted about 5 years before the science got overturned. We learned during COVID that 90-something% of the scientists all agreed that we all need to stay locked up in our house, until we needed to go riot on behalf of George Floyd, because that was more important.
Or come across the border.
Right, because they were censoring anybody who actually had a science-based opinion, like Jay Bhattacharya, instead of somebody who just repeated believing what they were told to believe about COVID. So don't tell me something about scientific consensus being the end of it. That's the anti-science approach. That's the people who don't ask questions. Is it repeatable? Can you do the experiment over and over again and get the same result?
Are you willing to have conversations?
Are you in fact even actually studying it? Like the whole idea with during COVID with masks, we said masks don't work, then we said they do work, then we said they don't work, then we said they do work, and you got to wear two of them. But that whole time, did Dr. Fauci or anybody else in any of the federal agencies ever run a study on how effective the mask was? No, we had to rely on something from Africa or something, which turned out to be not very accurate. But even that said masks didn't work. It's just
Ask them where they got the 6 feet rule, and they say completely out of our ass. We pulled that out one day in a meeting, I'm sure somewhere, where they said 6 feet. The germs can't travel 6 feet 1 inch.
what do we know about the climate change debate? We know that they have been predicting for years that there would be these dramatic changes that have not come true. We
Well,
also know that through the history of the world, there's been natural temperature variations. But most importantly, what we know about this current finding is that these are small parts of the atmosphere, less than 1%, that are naturally occurring. But if you give the government the power to control them, you give the government tremendous power to affect the economy, to reduce the amount of manufacturing, to make our lives more expensive, to make our lives more miserable, so that the busybody technocrat elites can tell us how to live our lives.
what's crazy about this is if you talk to people, and I brought it up a minute ago, the oil industry or coal industry, you go back 100 years, 70 years, 80 years, whatever it is, the green people were trying to do the same thing that had been done back in those days, grease up the hands and the palms of the politicians so they can get the subsidies and they can become the big players. I wrote this down because you nailed it. Government and power. I want you to think about this. They shut everything down during COVID. They bring all the economy back, then they take credit for the jobs. The border's fine. They rush in people. Now they're trying to fix it. You're a racist. I got to cause a problem, which leads to DEI, the climate change, affordable housing. They shut all the mental health institutions down. They have this housing crisis now. I mean, this homeless crisis now. They don't want to address. The reason I bring all that up is the government is really, really good. I mean, I think it's probably the best thing that the thing they're the most efficient at is creating a problem in front of everybody, letting the problem. And Eric has gone again. They create the problem in front of everybody. They don't try to hide the ball. They create the situation. They create the scenario. They create the chaos. They create the wasting of funds. They have this huge, massive problem. And then all of a sudden, because they've done it and it's years have gone by, Eric, you're back. Now all of a sudden they come in with a fix that, and they don't like the fix when Trump does it. They like the fix when they do it. Hey, we're going to manufacture this climate thing. We're going to take bits and pieces of truth. Instead of when we agree on that, we call it common ground. No. Unless you buy all of our new science that we've paid for, you are a denier. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're on the fringe. Look at all of these science that agree with us, the scientists. Oh, and by the way, with that, coincidentally, comes a lot of political power and trillions of dollars that's going to cost your economy. Now, it's not going to cost the economy of third world countries because they're not going to participate. They're going to keep burning the coal and the fuel because they're way behind us.
Yeah.
And they're going to overtake us.
By the way, Clint, just so I don't know what's going on, but I can still hear you when I get kicked
Good.
out.
I'm talking to you like you can.
Yeah, I know you can. But I have to go completely out to get back in.
Yeah,
So it's not
I don't
my
know how to fix
internet.
that,
It's
man.
something with the program or something. Because
Yeah.
if it was my internet, I wouldn't still be able to hear you. So
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm
yeah,
sorry about that.
I don't know what it is.
And it really rarely happens, but with you, it's been happening a lot. We'll figure it out.
It must
How about
be
the
because
Save Act, dude?
I'm saying stuff that they're afraid of. And so I'll wrap up with this. I think this is important because it's a significant change in this idea that the experts are so important at the federal level that they can control the climate or they can make a big dent in climate change by passing these massive regulations that affect all of us. And I also would, so the fact that we're not going to consider CO2 and nitrous oxide to be pollutants anymore, I think is a major step forward, a major step in the good direction for our country. And one last question people ask is, well, does the next president come in and actually just undo this and make them pollutants again? And the answer is, under the Administrative Procedures Act and under the Clean Air Act, I think the Supreme Court has said they would have to make an additional finding that something has changed. So the legal argument that's going to happen in this case is, what did the Trump administration and the Bergman EPA come up with that shows different science that makes this new rule valid? And then someday when there's a Democrat in the White House and they want to have the EPA totally start mandating stuff for the economy again and take over the economy over so-called natural gas, greenhouse gas, climate change becoming pollutants, they would have to make a new scientific finding that something else has changed to make it more reliable that the 0.04% of naturally occurring carbon dioxide that plants need to live is somehow a pollutant.
And I want to end this topic, and we'll move to the Save Act with my 2 cents. I'll speak for Eric and my friend Jeff. None of us want polluted air. We want the cleanest air we can have. We want the cleanest rivers we can have. We want the cleanest hiking trails and drinking water. I don't know of somebody that doesn't want it. And yes, we should absolutely hold corporations and businesses and people accountable who do not take that seriously and who do intentionally litter and clutter and pollute our waters and air above whatever restrictions we put on them. And if we find the restrictions aren't stringent enough, I'm happy to come back and have the conversation. I want to take care of the very environment that I love to go out and play in. And to put me in a group of I don't care is you, if you're on the other side of that, just not being honest and just not wanting to have a conversation. It is a religious tenet instead of being a thoughtful, a process of thought. Hey, what about the Save Act?
So very quickly about the SAVE Act, it has passed the House. It's going to have trouble in the Senate because I don't think they're going to overcome the filibuster.
Yeah, it's not going to pass.
So I bet it's not going to pass. I know John Fetterman is willing to support it. But that only gets us like 53 votes. We need 60 to overcome the filibuster. There's been some discussion of changing the filibuster to a talking filibuster, which might allow it to be overcome, but I just don't know about weakening the filibuster. The Republicans won't do that. Hopefully the Democrats don't do it next time they're in power, but of course they always talk about doing it. It's happened incrementally over time. Having said all that, on the merits of the arguments, I have seen many of my liberal friends posting stuff about all the dangerous stuff the SAVE Act will do to make it harder to vote. And I'm not buying most of it. I don't understand where they're coming from. For example, there was a Democrat congresswoman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, who says 160,000 women in her district won't be able to vote because they will not be able to go change their birth certificates to contain their married name. When a woman gets married, she doesn't change her birth certificate. Her birth certificate still has what her birth name was, but every day, women go through the process of legally changing their last name when they get married. It's on their passport. It's on their driver's license. It's not that hard to do. First of all, so the Democrat congresswoman it's right up there with the guy worried about Guam might sink if we put too many troops on it. You don't go back and change your birth certificate when you get married. What you do is you get your birth certificate and your marriage license. You go to the courthouse and you officially get your name changed. So now that you have you can get a driver's license and a passport issued in your married name. It's not, women do it all the time. Women are not stupid. And that's basically the assumption here. And a lot of the other arguments about
neither are people of color.
People of color are going to have a harder time getting to vote because it's like a poll tax to actually prove you're a citizen. People, if it's equally to everybody, why is it going to be harder for black people? It's like the joke we told over and over again that God announces from heaven above the world is ending tomorrow, and the Wall Street Journal reports God announces the world is ending, and the Washington Post and the New York Times report world ending tomorrow, minorities and children affected the most. Yeah. It's that level of logic. So
I brought this up with Jeff today. If you're okay with it, I want to go through what is required, what you need. So this is to get the new voting thing they're talking about. Any one of these will work. These are the must-haves, but you have to have one of these: either a U.S. passport, a real ID showing U.S. citizenship, which I just had to go get a real ID, by the way. It was time to renew mine. Military ID, or a government-issued photo ID showing U.S. birthplace. So you got to have one of those. Now, this next list is secondary. So if the primary ID doesn't prove citizenship, let's say you have a driver's license, but it's not the real ID, or you have an ID or a government ID, but it doesn't show your U.S. birthplace. You can have one of these. So you can have one of any other ones. And if one of those other ones don't show birthplace or citizenship, you can also bring one of these: a certified U.S. birth certificate, certification of naturalization, a consular a consular report of birth abroad, final adoption decree showing U.S. birth, or other federal proof of citizenship documents, which there is an array of. So there are, especially if you're planning it out, it's not like I just have to have a passport, or if I don't have my birth certificate, I'm out of luck. That's not how any of this works. And so, to your point, there is plenty of time for people to go get that stuff together. And is it easy? No. It took me a minute to find my birth certificate. I hadn't needed it in forever. And if I didn't get my birth certificate, there were other options for Clint.
I guess part of the shocking part of this to me is that how did all these people get registered to vote without having to have you do that already? How many non-citizens are currently registered to vote in the United States if the Democrats are now complaining that they had to prove that they were citizenships and they would lose their right to vote if they couldn't prove that they were citizenships? What's the definition of a citizen?
Residents? I don't know.
No. The definition of a citizen is somebody who has the right to vote in that society. It's basically the whole point of being a citizen is
Well,
to
the
have
reason I said I don't know, if you go to California, I referenced this on the Patrick Bet Davis podcast. He had somebody come on who moved from California to Texas, and he was surprised at how Texas required stuff that California didn't. In California, as an illegal immigrant, you can get an official state license, a driver's license, and a lot of times. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You're doing fine.
So my point on that is a lot of times here's where the vagueness comes from these election things. Also in California, you can get added to the voter rolls because they pull voter rolls from if you have a driver's license. Sometimes that's all you have to have. Does that mean one equals the other? No, but it does leave this little vague area of how many people who may accidentally or not accidentally get pulled from having a driver's license who is also an illegal, not here as a citizen, but they now are considered in the voting roll.
Yeah, the same people that push the motor voter registration,
Yes.
where you go to the motor vehicle office to say I want a driver's license, and then they register you to vote at the same time with no proof of citizenship. And then they want to tell us that people are not getting registered to vote who are non-citizens. It just doesn't ever happen. But somehow, if we require proof of citizenship going forward, that would be a disaster because all these people would get disenfranchised and citizens would not be allowed to vote because they don't have the documentation that we didn't ask for the non-citizens when we did register them to vote. So I have a real problem with the arguments that are being made about why we don't require people to prove that they're citizens in order to vote.
Listen to this real quick. In California, in California, you cannot require a photo ID to vote in federal or state elections. You cannot. Your jurisdiction cannot require. And so what that means is no photo ID requirement. California voters do not need to show a driver's license or any photo ID to be registered to vote. To register or vote, what is required is you must provide your name, address, and date of birth when registering and your signature to verify. The exceptions are for first-time voters. But if you've been grandfathered in, or if by some chance you've got that driver's license through California and now you're on the rolls, it's an easier way to circumnavigate that.
Yeah, one thing I want to clarify some people have been confused on is what does the SAVE Act actually propose? It's 2 steps. To register to vote the first time, to get on the rolls, you have to have proof of citizenship. And that's
Right.
the things you talked about. It's your passport, it's a birth certificate from the United States, it's something else showing you've been naturalized, one of those documents. The second step is when you go to vote, you don't have to then again produce the proof of citizenship. All you have to do when you go vote is present photo ID. They can be just a normal driver's license, not even the new ones, that shows you're that person on the voter rolls. So what the Democrats are opposed to in the SAVE Act is, first of all, you make it easier to register to vote if you're not a citizen, and make it easier to vote as somebody else if you show up at the polls because you don't need an ID. You just tell people your name. If you give them your name and address, then you can go vote and you can vote for somebody else very easily. Those are the 2 things that they are opposed to. Now, if there's other stuff in the bill, I'm happy to learn about it. I've seen some other stuff that maybe makes some extra steps. But if those were the only 2 things in the bill, would the Democrats still be opposed to it? Oh, yes, they would. Now, what does that tell you about the Democrats' voter rolls? I think that's an important part of understanding what we're actually talking about here. What's the point of being a citizen if your vote is diluted by non-citizens voting?
Yeah, me and you agree on this one. And I will say, me and Jeff did get into a little bit about today about trust. And I brought up our conversations we've been having with John Ballinger about the importance of trust and leadership. And Jeff just does not trust anything on the conservative side since 2016. It goes back beyond that, but he just zero, none, nada, zip. The reason he gives me any olive branches because I know he knows I'm going to pull that up. And I think he's trying his best. I don't trust anything from the institutions. I don't trust anything from the media right now, from voter processes. When you've got Pennsylvania that can say, we've got to circumnavigate our processes because there's a crisis. So the process is really no good. What good is a process if it only works when there's no stress or pressure put on it? That's what you have the process for. You've got mail-in ballots that hit like 40%, 30 to 40%, like 15 to 20% higher than any other time in history. And then we have all these mail-in ballot fraud allegations that get dismissed. And now I've learned that I really don't even trust a lot of times the judges in charge of some of these hearings because they are so biased in their own right. So I don't trust the institutions. Was the 2020 election stolen? No. Was it unfairly, I think, tilted? If you can't at least say that, then I don't think you're being honest when you've got the media component and these other things. The reason I'm bringing it up, if we're not going to protect our elections, I don't understand. And to the CNN's credit, they posted the majority of even Democrats support this. I mean, it's a losing argument for left-leaning Democrats and friends. Because if we can't protect elections, then this is all in naught anyway. We're just, sound beating the air.
Yeah. One of the other arguments I've heard from the left is this would stop people in the military from voting, and that's absolutely not true. It's got protections in it to allow them to vote the same way that they always have been. A question I got from a friend who asked me, well, what about in the Constitution? I thought it was supposed to be states that were supposed to control elections. And so I want to just address that very quickly, if you don't
I'm glad you are.
So in Article 1, the part of the Constitution that addresses Congress, that says that states will set the time, place, and manner of elections, but that Congress can also regulate or amend the regulations for the time, place, and manner. So if we can assume that requiring an ID to vote is part of the manner of voting or the manner of holding an election, then Congress does have the authority in Article 1 to establish the rules for voting for Congress. So for the senators and representatives, those rules can be set by Congress. In Article 2, when it comes to the electors, it actually says more clearly that the states can decide how our electors are voted on, and that traditionally in the old days, it was actually okay for a state to, for example, have the electors for president decided by the legislature, that it wasn't popular vote. Most states have gone to a popular vote. And so in theory, Congress may not have the power to regulate how the presidential elections are set up if a state does it some way differently than popular election. But if you put them on the same ballot as the congressmen and senators that are up for election, and every cycle there's always going to be at least a congressman, then the Congress can at least pass laws having to do with that. You'd either have to do separate ballots where you have congressmen, you need the citizenship rules under the SAVE Act. And if you want to do something else for president, states could in theory do that, maybe under Article 2, but it would be awfully hard to do. It would require a separate ballot. However, on top of that, the 15th Amendment, which is the right to ensure that these recently freed Americans, the slaves that were freed, still have the right to vote. It's really short. Let me just read it. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. I have seen some interesting academic research on this that basically says, look, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Does that mean states can abridge your right to vote for a different reason? If it's not race, color, or previous condition of servitude? But even if it's just limited to race, color, or previous condition of servitude, if we're saying that people of a certain race are having their votes diluted by allowing people of a different race to vote without voter ID, then Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation, may allow Congress to regulate not just congressional elections, but also the electoral vote. So there's an argument there. There's something similar. The 24th Amendment is getting rid of the poll tax, and it also says Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Also talks about a little bit about elections for president or vice president, or for senator or representative, the right to vote shall be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. That may also be limited to taxes, but the concept here is Congress has the power to regulate also presidential elections. It might be a stretch, but it's in the Constitution under at least the 15th Amendment and clearly under Article 1 that Congress has the power to regulate congressional elections. And so we'd get really iffy about presidential election. Well, it'd be slightly different for the presidential electors' votes, but there's still some argument to be had that it's okay. I can see some arguments the other way that if a state said, all right, we're going to follow the SAVE Act when it comes to electing senators and representatives, but for electoral votes, people can come in and vote without having an ID. That would be an interesting fight.
Yeah, here's where I get frustrated. And I'm glad I have intellectuals and smart people like you to talk stuff through. To me, this is where I just get pissed off at we the people, of, by, and for the people. We could be electing people to do common sense shit. There's no reason for California to be that way. There's no reason people that live in California should be dumb enough to vote people in that go, we're just going to willy-nilly give out IDs, whether it's truck drivers that don't deserve to be here or people that can't speak English. I love immigrants.
There's a great reason for it, Clint.
Well, okay.
Because if you don't have all these people without citizenship voting in California, the Republicans might win.
Well, so that's my point. So you go back to what I was going with that rant is I don't the people that vote in folks that just stand by what happened in Pennsylvania, that people that create sanctuary cities and then complain about what's happened. It just drives me insane when people look at it and the only time they want to start accountability is when the other team is in charge and they're trying to clean up your shit. It's absolutely common sense. If there's a vacuum of common sense, and it drives me crazy. You guys have more patience. Y'all send articles and talk. Oh, I talked to an attorney friend of mine, and the third part of that once. I'm like, God dang it, it's not that hard. It's really not. You don't have to be a genius to make some good basic decisions. And so I get very frustrated when I have these conversations because I'm like, it's just keep voting for the same shit and you get the same shit. What a surprise. All right. You want to move on to the economy?
I do.
All right, what you got for me, man?
So this one is it's specifically about the United States' place in the world. And I was doing some of my research, and we just saw Marco Rubio, to tie this to a current event. Marco Rubio just went and had a speech before Europe, and they were explaining to the Europeans that you guys are going downhill, and the United States is not going to stand by and watch the decline of Western civilization. A large part, going back to our earlier topic about EPA and climate change, there's a lot of what Europe has done is tried to go carbon neutral or net zero, and they've shut down a whole lot of their manufacturing and industry. And the result of that is we haven't seen a lot of climate change differences, but we have seen is Europe become very poor. The average wages or the average income per person in Europe is pretty low. And also the national economies of these countries is pretty low. And one thing I did just for fun, the entire world's GDP, gross domestic product, what's the amount that everybody produces every year if you add it all up? Do you want to take a guess, Clint, or you want me to just say it?
Just say it.
$100 trillion, round numbers. Round it off to 100 trillion. Do you know what the United States is?
No.
It's about 25% of that. The United States is 26.6 trillion. So we're actually 26% of the world's economy, just the United States. So I did some research and I actually got some AI help on this. And I said, if the United States was separated into individual states instead of one country, how many of our states would be separated? What were the largest three that could be separated as countries? The United States would still be the biggest economy in the world.
California, Texas, and Florida.
It's California, Texas, and New York. Very good guess, Clint. Two out of three. That's 66%.
I've got New York City's basically the whole state.
Yeah, California, Texas, and New York. If you exclude them, the United States is still the largest economy in the world at 19.6 trillion. And then China, then Germany at 4.6, then California at 4.1. Japan at 4.0, India at 3.9. So you got California, Japan, India are all about 4%. The United Kingdom's 3.5%, 3.6 trillion. France at 3.1, and then Texas at 2.7. Texas is the ninth largest economy in the world. if it's separate from
Isn't
the
New
United
York
States.
like 12th, 13th?
So then you go Italy, Brazil, then New York.
Yeah. I
Then
knew the third one was
Yeah.
high. I thought it was Florida. Yeah.
So then I asked this separate question. I think this one's just pretty fascinating. If the United States were 50 different countries, so it's not on the list at all as the United States, where would each country fall on the list?
You mean where would each state?
Where would each state fall on the
Yeah.
list? And let me just do a little bit of this, and it's kind of fun. So China would be the biggest, then Germany at 5 trillion, Japan at 4.2, India at 4.1, California at 4.1. So California would be the 5th biggest country in the world. The UK would be 6, 7th is France, 8 is Texas, 9th is Italy, 10th is Russia, 11 is New York, then Canada, Brazil, Spain, Mexico, South Korea, Australia. 18th is Florida at 1.7 trillion, or 1.7% of the world's economy is just Florida. Then Turkey, Indonesia, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, then Illinois. Illinois is the 23rd largest economy in the world. Then Poland, then Pennsylvania as 25th, then Switzerland right at 1 trillion. There's the 1% mark. Everybody else is less than a trillion. But I'm going to finish out the top 40. Ohio, then Taiwan, then Georgia, then Washington State, then New Jersey, then North Carolina, then Massachusetts, then Virginia, then Michigan, and then we finally get to another foreign country, Belgium, then Ireland, then Argentina, Sweden, and Israel. So out of the top 40 richest countries in the world, Clint, there's about 12 or 13 of them are U.S. states, maybe even more. I haven't actually counted.
Well,
I'm just counting while we look at this.
Okay, because I was going to ask how many
It's
made
about
the top
15. 12. It's about 15 U.S. states.
How many made it in the top
40.
12? Just states.
In the top 12 is that's the top 3: New York, Texas, and California.
So we'd make it in the college playoffs. We'd have a good shot to win the college playoffs.
Yeah, and in the top 20, you had Florida.
Yeah.
But in the top 40, we've got 15. So in the 20s, we've got a whole bunch of states.
What's your takeaway on the economy based off this? What's your takeaway?
That the United States is so huge, no wonder the rest of the world shakes their boots when it comes to tariffs. No wonder the rest of the world has to trade with us. No wonder the dollar is still so strong around the world.
So do you want me to jump in, or do you want to keep going for a second?
No, the other list I was going to do is about per capita income. If you count each state as a state.
I was going to talk about tariffs.
The rich. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in on that? Then I'll let you take it off. So the tariffs, all the articles come out about the economy. We won't talk about the jobs, which are doing better, and the tariffs. And I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of tariffs. I think they've been used right a bunch in the last 13 months. I don't really understand the Canada stuff as well. I don't understand going after our allies like he has. I think sometimes if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But just to the headlines, because this is the headlines that came out from the economy on the left. The Americans took $1,000 hit. They paid for the majority of the tariffs. Well, if you do a little research on this, the inflation has been gradually improving. If you took the average ease off the Americans from better inflation rate, it's around $1,750 more money. So the actual final verdict on this is, it may have gone to the American people. I'm not even sure how that was, those studies were done. But overall, this is what kills me about the media. The overall families got between anywhere $500 to $1,200 more in their pocket over the last 13 months, even with the tariffs. And the tariffs have brought us some peace in different regions. It's brought us a little closer to the table on China. It's helped us with Venezuela. Again, I don't understand the ally part, but I think it's important, if you're going to talk tariffs, for us to remember that's working hand in hand with inflation. Back to you, sir.
So the United States has this massive economy where we can divide up in individual states and still end up being on the in the top 40 list for a bunch of states. And the United States can give away 3 of its biggest states and still be number 1 in the world. That was the key takeaway from the first list. Now, this next list is per capita income, the average income per person. So it's not the average income per family. It's not the average income per working person. This is the average income for every single person divided by the total income. So this counts babies. This counts retired people. This counts kids. This counts non-working moms. It counts disabled people. Clint, the richest country in the world by per capita income is Monaco. They only have like 400,000 people, and it's a tax haven, and they have a whole bunch of multimillionaires and billionaires living there, and their average income is 288,000 per person.
Wow.
The average in the world is about $50,000 per year, but there's a lot of poor countries that are way below that average. The next one, Liechtenstein, then Luxembourg, and then Ireland are all over 100,000. Liechtenstein is 200,000, Luxembourg 138,000, Ireland's 109. But according to the research I found, all four of those, Monaco, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and Ireland, that really is not that much income for the average person, because that includes, like in Ireland, Apple and Google report their earnings there. And so these corporations are included, and it's really hard to tell how much the people are making there per person. But they're very rich countries overall, because they are tax havens and corporate havens with very small populations, and very large companies keep their headquarters there. That throws those off. So Monaco, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Ireland, and then Switzerland, 100,000. Then what the research shows, what's the next biggest income in a state or country in the world? So counting each state as a state per person based on average income. You're going to love this one.
Oh, let's hear it.
Washington, D.C.
Oh, really?
$101,000 per year, despite the fact that Washington, D.C. has a huge poor population. Why? Because there's enough people in Washington, D.C. making huge money. In fact, when I first went through AI, it said the average in Washington, D.C. would have been number 2 on the list at like 280,000 per person, because it just took the gross domestic product of Washington, D.C. and divided it by the number of people and not the actual income. There's a huge amount of money in Washington, D.C. So after that, we got Singapore at number 7, 93,000 per person. And then listen to what happens next. Massachusetts, 87,000, Connecticut, 87,000, Norway, 86,000. They have a lot of oil revenue for their people. And then we have New Jersey at 80, California at 80, Washington State at 79, New York at 79, Colorado at 78, Wyoming at 77, New Hampshire at 77, Maryland at 73, North Dakota at 73, and Virginia at 72. Of the highest incomes per person in the world, 12 out of the top 20 are U.S. states, if you divide them up by states. And of the top 20, 5 of the ones that are really ranked high are ones that it's really based on a lot of corporate earnings because they're tax havens. So of the ones that are really based on income, we're 12 out of the top 15. If you go on down the list some more, you get to like Qatar is 21, below Virginia. Minnesota is right in Alaska, and then Denmark, all in the 70s. Illinois and South Dakota above Australia. And I can keep going down the list. Pennsylvania, Nebraska, Rhode Island, Vermont, then the Netherlands, then Oregon, Texas, Nevada, Hawaii, Delaware, Wisconsin, Montana, Kansas, Florida, Maine, Utah, Iowa, Arizona, Missouri, Tennessee, North Carolina, Ohio, Indiana. All states making more than the average in the world, and making more. Have I named any other European countries other than those tax havens?
No.
And so I asked the question. Here's the next question. Remember what when we went back and looked at the richest economies in the world, we had China and then Germany below the United States. So if you go to Germany, they're the 3rd biggest economy on the planet. But if you divide it up by people, what's their average income? 52,000, right around the average on the planet. How many U.S. states have an income below Germany? Take a guess.
How many states below Germany?
Yep.
7.
Is that your final answer?
Well, I wasn't looking. I don't know. Closer to 3, maybe. Let's go with. I'm going to go with 2.
It's 1.
Oh, I came really close.
You want to take a guess what it is?
Tennessee.
No. Tennessee's pretty high up on the list.
Mississippi. Arkansas.
It's Mississippi.
Okay. Yeah.
It is Mississippi. Tennessee is pretty high up there. I saw it on the list. Tennessee's actually on the top. Where are we? We're number 47 in the world. If we're
That's not bad.
But that includes a whole lot of states above us.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah.
The only U.S. state that's poorer per person than Germany in terms of income is Mississippi. What's that? And the UK is worse off than Germany. The rest of Europe is worse off. Germany's better than Mississippi, and all the rest of Europe, pretty much, except Norway and those tax havens,
Or
are
worse.
worse than every single United State.
Yeah.
And so going back to now present day events, and I'll leave it here, is Marco Rubio goes over there and says the United States is not going to stand by and oversee the decline of the West.
The managed decline was a great line. The managed decline.
And you Europeans have gone for net zero. You've gotten rid of all your manufacturing, and you've
Open borders.
You've opened borders. You've imported a lot of people that don't believe in your culture, that are up in the crime rate, that are not assimilating. And he got a standing ovation, by the way, because he said it in a way that was a little more nice than J.D. Vance said a year ago.
Not from Jeff Styles, he did. He got booed by Jeff.
He got standing ovation from the people of Europe, who are mostly farther left. They're probably about the same left as Jeff, because they actually realize if they don't start recognizing the United States' opinion on this, that they're going to get left out.
Well, they're actually living with the consequences. I want to go back to what I was saying to add my 2 cents on the economy. Right now, if you take people making $50,000 and under household incomes, they have improved their buying power by a little over almost, let me pull this up because I had it run up here a minute ago. Almost 2%. It's it's $1,200. I know I brought that up, but a lot 2%. But if you take it overall, the buying power of the dollar is up 2.7% from 2024. And so the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is these small improvements. That's the stuff I think the Trump administration should be talking about. Household incomes under $75,000, you got a $1,200 or $1,700 raise. Under $50,000, it was a $1,200. So even the net, if you add in the worst of tariffs, you still made more money and your dollar bought more the last 13 months than it did in the 13 months prior. And that is not that's you can't really argue that stuff. And core inflation, which I think is housing, energy, food, and is it housing? I can't remember. There's 3 components of core. Core is actually doing better even than the overall inflation rate. So it's very frustrating when I see the new economy numbers come out and the takeaway is Americans carry the burden for the tariffs. And I'm like, but that's what you said a minute ago, an anecdotal story about the Delaware River in a set time period. I've got this little one-off without any context. You could run around and say, look how bad it is.
And you said that's for people who make less than $50,000.
Yeah. So I think go over here and pull it back up. Go ahead.
I think the average in the United States I read was part of my statistics here was 62,000. So that's not the average wage earner. That is the per capita income in the United States is 62,000. So people making 50,000 or less are below the national average per person.
That's why. But I wanted to bring it up. Even they did better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The point is even the poor people, and even $50,000 on average is below Mississippi.
And that's why when you get into conversations about affordability, it's such a quagmire. It's a sand trap. It's quicksand, because I define affordability different than my friend Eric Buchanan. Eric takes a lot of trips that they're not very affordable for me. So if we're gonna survey affordability, I'm going to base it off, what am I going to filter that through? Am I going to filter it off what I've seen on TikTok? Am I going to filter it and take into consideration, well, and the reason I can't afford some shit is Clint's made some really bad financial decisions, or something's happened in life and I'm different than it was 5 years ago. Affordability's changed from the 1980 to 1990 to 2026. That is a very subjective thing. It's not metrics. And again, that's why you talk policy. Affordability, affordable housing. Well, what's affordable in Chattanooga? What's affordable in Austin, Texas? Well, what's affordable, Eric, compared to the first home he bought? Oh, it's way more affordable when I grew up. That's a squirrely term that everybody throws out. I think another emotional cudgel to beat us to death with, like your compassion and toxic masculinity and racist and all these nods. Oh, it's affordability. Well, let's define it. Nope. I just want to say things aren't affordable and blame you for it.
Can I just say that when Meg and I bought our first house when I was in the Navy, that the interest rates when we went looking for the house were at 13% for a mortgage rate, and it came down. We locked in 12.25 or something like that, and we were happy campers that the interest rates had come down that much, because earlier they'd been something like 16% on a mortgage.
My parents bought one. I think it was 17.
Yeah, the interest rates were 16, 17%. Yeah. When Meg and I bought our first house in the early 90s, 12.25% sounded great. Now today, people aren't buying houses because the interest rates are over 5%. And most of them have no idea how
they got spoiled with the threes, and that was the anomaly. That was the outlier of history.
Yeah. So back in the day, the affordability was If you go back far enough, Clint, those of us who saw what it was like in the late 1900s understand that interest and inflation and credit card interest rates of 30% or whatever when we were kids, just that insanity. But people have no idea how good they have it today.
They don't. We don't. They don't. And anything you want to add to this? Anything you want to bring to the table before we wrap this one up? I think it's been a pretty good one today.
Yeah, that's I was pretty fascinated by how rich the United States is by comparison. When you start breaking down individual states, and we still count amongst the richest countries in the world by state.
So me and Jeff did have an interesting conversation. I know we can't address it now. We don't have a lot of time, but I'll throw it out there to you to think about. Jeff said something in passing about Marco Rubio. He said something about we shouldn't feel the shame of our country as far as taking the land from indigenous people and colonizing them. And I said, well, I agree with him. Why should I feel shame for shit I didn't do? And he was like, man, you've got to feel shame for the things we did. That's you can't just ignore and not face it. I'm like, well, that's not what I said. I said, I would never tell my son that you are all of the bad things you've ever done. If you fought through them and become a better person, you are the person that fought through the things. That doesn't mean you don't learn the lesson and acknowledge it. I don't know of anybody that says the way things happened 200 years ago wasn't great. It was not all bad, but how we took the land even in the 1600s before we became here. I'm not saying everything was good in our history, but to tell me 300, 400, 200 years later, I should feel shame for being the country that faced what was going on in the whole world as human beings everywhere of all colors, and that we're the ones that kind of spearheaded fighting through that. It is okay to say that was a bad thing, but I'm very proud that my country led the fight to become a better thing. I didn't understand that. It's like, again, I have to either be shame is who we are, and I'm proud to be an American anyway, or we just learn the lessons. I'm like, dude, I don't understand why I should feel shame. I didn't do jack shit. I didn't do anything. I'm trying to live the American dream based off all the good and bad that my ancestors did. Does that make sense, or am I being too simplistic?
I am ashamed that some of my Scottish ancestors fought on the side of the English during the uprising of 1745. As far as I can tell, some of the Buchanans were on the wrong side of history there. And my shame for not being on the Highlander side defending Bonnie Prince Charlie, that's never ending shame, Clint. I'm just stuck with that shame.
It's not my fault they were idiots. I
Well,
guarantee you go back in my history, I got racist people in my family, and I also have patriots in my family. What the hell? I don't get that.
The Buchanans turned out to be on the winning side, though, because the Highlanders lost, and so they
There can only be one. I thought of the movie. My fault, Highlander. My bad. But I guess I think it's a really. I'm making fun of it, but I think that's a conversation that I would like to have a deeper conversation with somebody, because I think that is what's being taught now. Is we should all walk around and do these. When you win an award, it's like we're all on stolen land. Every land around the world has been stolen by either a tribe, a clan, a cult, a nation. I'm not. I don't know. It's very frustrating for me to hear like you want to teach my kids to be shameful, or to look at things that your ancestors did that weren't great, but look at the kind of men and women that fought through that of all colors that became something that the world had never seen before.
It's not about the idea of the shame in the past or history. It's about the revolution. They want to undermine our sense of history, our sense of America, our patriotism, our belief in the founding fathers, and the joint belief in the Constitution, and that the idea that the founding fathers set us on the right path. And maybe we didn't live all up to it right away, but we eventually have been working for 250 years to live up to those values. They won't listen to that argument because they don't care about that argument. They're trying to undermine it because they want to have a communist revolution.
He said if he heard that, he would say, you are rewriting history and are ignoring the evils of the past. He said that to me today.
Yeah, and he's trying to emphasize the evils of the past instead of paying attention to the bigger picture, because he wants to undermine the good parts of that history because he's in favor of the revolution.
I think he's bought into the shame. That's just me. I'm not going to buy into the shame. I got a plenty I've done in my life that I'm very ashamed of. I don't need the guilt of ancestors past.
Borrow the guilt of some of your ancestors.
No, that's on them, man. The people that come after me are going to have plenty to look back on Clinton and go, man, that guy he did some stuff I'm not very proud of.
I
All
had
right, man.
I had ancestors that fought on both sides of the Civil War, so I'm not sure how much I should hate myself and how much I should be proud of myself at any given moment.
All right, guess who was in my family? I wasn't going to bring this up, but I've never said this to you, but I know because we did the genealogy. Guess who's in my family?
Benedict Arnold?
Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis, really? Okay, the two biggest traitors in American history right there.
I'm sure I owe people money from everywhere. Somewhere down the road, I'm sure that piece of shit gene in me lives somewhere. I'm trying to fight it, I guess. I don't know. You got a recommendation for us?
I do. We were on with John on Friday, John Ballinger, on Wednesday with the Veterans Podcast, and I looked up his First Lead You Leadership Development Podcast. It's the number 1 ST, then a separate word, lead, LEAD, and then a separate word, the letter U. Some of those podcasts, I've gotten started on those. Anybody who is running a business or is in a position where they need to learn more about leadership, check those out. I think those are good podcasts.
Yeah. First Lead You podcast. He's a sponsor of a lot of this stuff, especially he's one of the sponsors of the actual studio I'm sitting in. He gave a little extra for that. So shout out to John Ballinger. He's not here. You know what? I'm gonna end up with, I'll use that one as well, but go check out my friend and me, Jeff Styles, the Jeff Styles. It's with a Y, STYLES, thejeffstyles.com. We talk about a lot of stuff, find a lot of common ground, but we also get into it a little bit. All right, buddy. I'm out of here.
Good job, Clint. See you.
Yep. See you, everybody.
Bye.